Hey, welcome back, slot car racers. I'm Ted, and this is the BP Slot Racing channel. Welcome to my home. A few videos back, I mentioned that Fernando Alonso was one of my favorite Formula One drivers, and that I really appreciated the livery of his car. Now, I was originally going to build my own version of his car, but as it turns out, NSR has actually built a version here, and I don't have to do any painting or decaling. There is one drawback though, and that is that it's understandably an analog car. This comes from NSR, and once you step out of the Carrera spotlight, yeah, your cars are all going to need to be chipped. And the Carrera chip, you know, I don't know, it might have fit this, but I didn't think it would. Somehow Carrera has figured out a way to put them in their Formula One cars. I've got Max Verstappen's Red Bull car upstairs, made by Carrera, and it's chipped. But the way these are designed, while they have the included LED spot here already drilled in it, there's really no place. They didn't leave any room for the full-size Carrera chip, but luckily the Slottecniks FT chip will fit in here, or I would like to think will fit in here. I managed to get them into the NSR Formula 86, 89 cars, and now I'm going to go ahead and try to fit it into Alonso's number 14 Ferrari and put it on the track. So if you hang in there, I'll show you how I did it step by step, or at least sequence by sequence, and let's see if we can't get a chip in here. Okay, so here's how this all started. The first thing I did was I cut out a mock-up of the roughly the same size as the FT Slottecniks chip, although it's probably about twice as thick, so you still have to take in consideration these plugs here. Dave from the UK there at Slot R suggested that since I was somewhat handy with a soldering iron, I might venture to remove these and take these off if I don't plan on running lights, and I didn't, but I'd rather not go to that trouble. So what I'm going to do now is pull the body, and I'll reposition this around in certain areas to see if it'll fit, and then we'll worry about the actual chip and running the wires here. Actually, I've already determined that this will probably fit somewhere around here. We'll see. Let's get the body off. Okay, looks like only 2 screws hold that body on. And so before I ever bought the chip, I didn't want to spend the money to find out that there was no way it was going to fit. So it looks like this chip, this is about the only place that this chip could actually fit. Everything else would have to be inside these lines here. And so it looks like it should fit there, even with the added thickness. It looks like it's going to actually fit in here easier than it did on my NSR Formula 86, 89 cars. And so here's the actual chip. And so it looks like it could probably rest here, no problem, without the body on it right now. Once again, wire lengths are going to be an issue. with the exception of this LED. I could shorten it, but I don't want to go to the added hassle of doing that. If I can insert it and then have to deal with the bulk, only have to deal with the bulk of this much wire here. On the NSR Formula 86, 89 cars, I found a place to wad that up. But these brush wires, I'm going to custom cut to the proper length. There's not enough room under here to wad up that much wire. Same goes for the motor connections. I'll custom cut those to the exact length. So looks like it's going to fit right there. I'm not going to secure it in any way. I might insulate it a little bit. These connections here may come in contact. This is some kind of coating on the motor, but if it were to wear through, it could actually short these out. So I will likely put a coating of something on here, maybe some super glue or some nail polish to kind of help insulate them. I don't think it's going to be an issue. I think it's going to go ahead and ride right there just fine. And if you don't secure it, then you'll maintain the motor pod motion here that you want. So let's get to it. So the first thing I'm going to do is take some of this nail polish and just brush some on here as a form of insulation. This will dry in no time, help insulate it. And like I said, there's already some sort of coating on the motor. If the motor were bare metal, I would go even further to insulate those wires. Okay, we let that tack off a little bit. Now we just have to determine our wire lengths. This will be the brush contacts. And so what I will likely do is figure out some way to tack it down here so it stays in place while I route the wires. I've got some of that sticky tack stuff somewhere. And that'll hold that in place while I deal with the wires. Now, one of the things you won't be able to see that I can right now is that without the body on here, this is actually dragging the surface of the track. And so I might have to do some front end tuning here, which I've already done. What I'm going to discover is that the chassis sagging here is because of the lack of the body being mounted to the chassis. Okay, I've readjusted the camera somewhat so that you don't lose my work or being able to see my work. In order to make the connections to the brushes, I've decided I'm going to go ahead and remove this front axle completely. Should be a spacer, yes. This front axle completely so that I can access these wires here, get them out of their little capture points here. This should be fairly easy to do. Yep, they just pop right out of there, and hopefully I'll be able to niggle them back down in there. But first things to remove these motor wires here, and we'll rewire the chip motor wires in their place. Okay, I like to keep a damp cloth around here when I'm soldering, as it keeps that tip clean. You want a nice clean tip there for your soldering iron. And what I will wind up doing here is I will connect these heatsink pliers. Heatsink tweezers is what they are. So that, well, let's get this out of the way. Evidently I burned up the motor in this. It definitely isn't running anymore. Got to figure out why. And it should just take a touch. And there it's released. And another touch here, and it's released. And what I will likely do now is I will take some sort of tool here, and I'm going to bend this tab up just a little bit, make it easier to solder wires to. And then you can always bend them down again if you need to once the wires are connected. Okay, I've taken a bit of this tacky clay stuff here, and what I want to do is take this chip down. Now I could probably leave this in place, but like I said, if you secure this chip and it's leaning against this motor pod, you're not going to get, well, that's actually pretty good. No, that's something I'll have to consider once we get the wires sorted out here. I need the red and the black. Now, I may just have the same issue as I had on the last chip. This red wire is of a finer gauge than this black wire, and this black wire, well, it's considerably stiffer, and I had a heck of a time connecting these up to the brushes and then having the slot guide here center up. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Right now I need to route these a little bit here. This one I believe came, let's see, it's red on the right. This is a Carrera. So the red one goes on the right, the black one goes on the left. You can see this chip's giving me trouble already. It doesn't want to stay put. But I only need it there temporarily to get some wire links. Let's see if I can jam that wire down in that groove a little bit. And so I won't be trimming too much off of this. You know what? I may not trim much off at all. Let's get the red one in place here. They won't need much trimming. No, I think that's going to work out fine. And I believe in this case, the purple is the positive and the gray is the negative. Those I will be trimming to length because they simply will not. There's no place to stash them. So let's get on with it. Let's route those first and get the motor wires connected, and then we'll work on routing. See how much stiffer? That actually has a memory, and that makes it hard to have the centering action that you need because this is so stiff. Anyway, okay, the motor wires need to be as short as possible, and so I'm going to go ahead and route these as short as possible. So this will be cutting, I'll be cutting pretty close to here, and the gray wire even shorter. The purple is plus, and while there's no plus or minus on the motor, this end here is marked with a red mark. I'm assuming that's plus. So let's get to cutting here. Okay, my wire strippers are not small enough to trim these off, so I'm going to have to very carefully, once I've got them cut to length, strip them back. So I'll cut through them lightly here with this tool. And as you can see, I was successful there. Let's see if we can't strip this one back. You don't need very much. There we go. Now this is an important next step. and that is to tin these wires. This makes it so they'll bond almost instantly to the motor contacts since they're already tinned also. So we've got our wires tinned. Now we just need to get them, hold them in place as close as we can, and that's where these heatsink tweezers here come in handy. This prevents the wires from being overly hot, and then it's just a matter of taking your soldering iron, and it only takes a touch. Should only take a touch to bond these together, just like that. And we'll do the same with the gray wire. See, make sure you don't burn something you don't intend to. Okay, come on. 65-year-old shaky old guy. There we go. It only takes a touch. And there we go. Okay, so I've taken the motor wires and I've routed them as close to the inside of the chassis. Like I said, we have to remain inside this heavy beam here, this part of the chassis. This, of course, is for the LED, but you need to sneak them way under there because there's going to come a time when I'm going to have to fit these wires through here, and I may be removing the driver's legs here in order to get enough wire or get enough clearance here to the guide. We'll see. Okay, the next real challenge, I guess you could call it, is getting these little metal pins out so I can replace the wires. And it's not too bad if you can pry up on them with an X-Acto knife, is what I do. Just like that. There we go. You can pull these out and discard them, or you can save them for later, but you will need the little barrels here. So, save your little barrel dealies. They'll be going on in the next step. Now here, once again, routing is going to be critical. So, I double checked, and I'm glad I did, because Carrera, the red, goes on the left. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of squish it down here in these little guides, and hopefully I'll be able to squish the black one down in the guides. But if you remember what I said, this is a heavier gauge wire. Not much, but it's heavy enough. And let's see, I think what I will do is I will route this black wire under here and try to get it to a point where I can lock it down into the chassis. That heavy gauge wire, see, doesn't want to go in. Pretty good there, pretty good there. So I may drop a little bit of ultraviolet glue, probably here. This will help hold the wires in while I fiddle with the guide. I'll use some ultraviolet to cure that. Okay, so as you can see, it's starting to come together, and I don't have a lot of excess wires Looks like everything's going to stay within the chassis pretty much. The only other thing I have to deal with now is, of course, this LED. And since I'm not going to cut it, about the only thing left to do is to make room enough for it to be inserted into the mount. And that's a good, solid, steady, hard mount. So I'm not worried about that coming out. I'm not going to bother to adhese it or glue it in any way. So, all right, we're almost there. We'll be testing it out here in 15 or 20 minutes. Okay, so right now it's looking like I may be able to route these wires along the motor here. I may turn this a little bit so that it's facing maybe directly backwards before I bend these pins. And here's a test fit of the chassis here before I finish up the... And it looks as though... Am I going to be able to put a screw in there? Yep. Yeah, this is where things get a little touch and go. See, it's not quite going to fit in there, and I'm going to have to figure out why exactly. I don't think that the driver is having any issues with the way I've routed the wires. As you can see, I've got the wires routed inside the frame, and so there shouldn't be anything holding it back here. Doesn't appear to be, anyway. So it's going to take a little bit of finagling. I may have to trim some from out of here. We'll see. It didn't go together quite like I wanted to, and it could have something to do with these wires here, because I don't think that the chip is actually in the way, but we'll see. Yeah, something is holding it up. As you can see, there's quite a gap here, and it's probably those white light connectors that are getting in the way, interfering with the body somehow. On the Formula 86, 89 cars, it took some trimming, but there's definitely something going on here, and it looks like I may be either removing these light connectors or filing them down. Maybe it just needs a corner off of one, you know, so we'll see. I'm also going to pull this LED, hopefully I won't damage it, twist it in such a way that the wires are actually facing a different direction, so that when I bend it over, they're not coming in contact. Well, maybe I can do that just like that. Yep, it's not cut and dried. You're gonna have to do it's gonna make you work for it. So I'll come back and let you know what my solution was after I investigate what the problem is. Okay, I've decided that what I'm going to have to do is remove 2 or all 3 of these connectors here. I'm going to take Dave's advice and see if I can't do that. I've got my heatsink pliers gripping it fairly closely. It's already somewhat loose, and so what should happen is I only need to touch these 2 pins here, get them melted, and then this should just pull right off, since it's just a circuit board of some sort. It's certainly loose. Oop. Yeah, it's turning out to be a little harder to pull on than I thought. It's definitely loose. And if you can break the solder here, which I've done, and if I keep exercising it till it cools, I may be able to pull this right off. Now, there's still some issue. Looks like I'm going to have to trim away. There's a small flash of material here that connects these two pieces together, and I may have to trim that down a little bit right here. I don't know how much it's going to need. It may only take a file, but if I trim it down far enough, I may have to figure out another way to adhere this part of the body, the lower part of the air intake here, to the upper part of the body. I'm still plugging away at it. Even with all the work I've done so far, routing wires the way I have, making the chip as thin and narrow as it can be. I may still have to remove that, but so far that doesn't seem to be the issue. It seems to be there's some interference between here and right here. And so I will continue to work on that. So we might not be running it in 20 minutes, like I said. We'll see. I will get her done. As it turns out, there is quite an easy way to remove these without having to desolder them. You could take them and just kind of rock them back a little bit, and that somewhat dislodges the pins that are sticking through here. And then I was able to take my tiny cutters and just snip the wires, and as you can see, they cut flush and there's no overhang, so there's no shorting together. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove that one like I did the others. Snip them off quite easily and almost flush. See how easy that was? Okay, there we go. Snipped off. So now they're all missing, they're all gone, and this chip will only ever be good for this car, which is my intention anyway. So let's try our fit now. Wires notwithstanding here, and even with all that, I'm still not able to line up the chassis mount. Well, there's the chassis mount there. And now it looks like the chip may have slid up in there, but you can see there's some pressure here pushing out. And like I said, I'm pretty sure that that's this here against the chip. Looks like I still have a little bit of chassis float there. Still working on it. Okay, so what I've done is I've dropped some thin CA here and let it seep down this seam here, so that when I cut, file, or sand away on this, it won't lose adhesion when I sand that. Okay, with a sanding drum on my Dremel, or on my Fordham tool, I chipped away here at this a little bit, sanded it down smooth, and I'm glad I glued that because it probably would have come apart. And now you can see that our clearance issue is pretty much solved. Let's see, can I line up the body screw? Yep. Now all I have to do is get the wires routed properly, and that should lay fairly flat. So yeah, I'm anxious to see how this does on the track here. Let's finish it up. Okay, so we finally got the wire routing dealt with, and as you can see, of course, we cut the wires here to a custom length, tried to keep them as short as possible. I could have shortened up this gray one a little bit more, but the problem is if you get it too short, then it's hard to handle and strip the wire off the end. So I kept enough that I can get my fingers around it. We've successfully run the wires through the channels here to the guide, and while it's not what I'd like. I guess it's fairly self-centering, but this extra gauge, I found out it's stranded aluminum, and there's only about 6 strands, which makes it much stiffer. It looks like it's going to work out. Removing the light connectors here, the light plugs, helped out quite a bit. I've still got a little bit of chassis float here, but I've got a feeling that's going to disappear once I get the body on. What happens is that the body will rest on these wires. The wires will put pressure on the chip, and then you'll lose some of your body float. Also, another thing I noticed was that when you put the body on, you need to have the body screws, unfortunately, fairly tight. When the car comes from the factory, there's actually the motor pod float, and there's some body float. But if you do that, this chassis here is really flimsy. And I know they make a stiffer chassis, and I think that might not be a bad idea to upgrade to the stiffer chassis. That way you can tune it a little bit better. But the key here is that if you can put the body on and not have any gaps here or here, and if you can line up the hole for the body screw without forcing it one way or another, you will, you know you're pretty close. Let's see, I've had to put just a little bit of pressure this direction here in order for that hole to line up. So hopefully that won't give us any issues. It probably has to do with the wires running to the guide. See, it's really not, well, it's just okay. It's actually better than my Formula 86, 89 cars. So we've got a little bit of pressure here, not a lot. There's no gap. It's sitting pretty flat. So the only thing left to do is to oil it up and put it on the track and see where we're at. So let's go do that. Okay guys, how about this? I figured out somewhere to put my camera about 7 feet in the air in one corner. I still can't quite get the whole track in here, but that's not the point of this video anyway. Let's put this Aston Martin here to the test, see if the chip works. Okay, first things first. Turn on some track lights here. Okay, let's program it to the red controller, which is my controller generally. And here we go. Oh my goodness, look at that. She took right off. It does not sound like it's dragging, which is what I expected. But I checked it before I came up here, and it looked like I had a couple of thousandths of an inch of clearance. It is making kind of a funny noise. I have a feeling it's those hard front tires rumbling along the track here. Oh, there she got away a little bit. Wow. Very nice for what it is. And it's working. Okay, how about a lane change? Let's see if it's changing lanes. There's a lane change. Uh-oh. Already out of the slot. That didn't take long. Once again, here we go. There we are. Lane change again. missed the lane change. I should clean those tires. The track is probably fairly dirty. Okay, there's a lane change. There's a lane change there. So the LED's working. Everything seems to be... Oh, and look at that. She comes right into the pit. Well, I'm very pleased with that. And with a little bit more tuning and some decent tires, I think it's going to be a fun car to race. Moves fast down front straight. I better adjust those brakes though, because I like to brake very late into the corners. But there you go. It can be done successfully with just some minor skills. I'm well pleased. Okay, I programmed a ghost car here just to see if we got a little competition here. Whoa, my goodness. That Aston Martin's fast. But my tires are shot already. Time to go to the hard compounds. Can you believe it? I cannot catch that Aston Martin. She's too squirrely. Yep, look at that. Drifting in the corners. Oh, and she's out of the track. And there goes my Aston Martin. Both of them. Okay, here's one last oddity that I noticed running this on the track. For some reason, on multiple occasions, as a matter of fact, every time I run it, the wheel here, or the tire, wants to come off of this wheel. And I'm not sure what exactly is behind that. If you guys can tell me what causes that driver's side tire to come off the rim. It's obviously because it's running on the track. You know what? I think I'm just going to go ahead and ditch these tires for some Paul Gauge and just be done with it. Okay guys, that was kind of a lot of fun. I'm a hobbyist by nature. I have built radio controlled airplanes and helicopters and flown them since I was in single digits, basically. And so I'm not averse to taking on a hobby modification of some sort. Since I'm retired, it gives me something to do. But yeah, thanks for tuning in. I'm glad to see that this was a success, and I hope this information helps you guys in case you ever decide to chip one of these NSR cars. So, like and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time on BP Slot Racing.